I guess I want to start with a couple interesting asides. One, it was 3 years ago today that I got a glimpse of heaven. And in fact, not only is it 3 years ago today, but if you make an adjustment for the time zone, I was living on the East Coast then, now live in the Midwest. It was 3 years ago today within an hour, which I think is pretty darn cool. And I've heard it said that let's see, what is it? Coincidences are miracles where God chooses to remain anonymous. So I think that's a pretty cool coincidence slash miracle that I'm giving this talk pretty much exactly 3 years ago after the event. The other thing I want to mention, then I've given this talk many, many times, and this isn't really part of my prepared comments, but gosh, about 36 hours ago, I had to put my beloved Teddy, a dog, to sleep. She was 13 years old, and I cried a river of tears. And yet, what is helping me get through it is remembering where I was and how much joy and peace I felt in that place, and knowing that that's where she is now. And it's interesting how that has helped me get through it. I mean, she was my best friend for 13 years, and now I can know where she is and know that. Actually, I thought about Exodus 23:20 that says, "I send an angel before you to bring you into the place which I have prepared for you." And I thought, that's my Teddy. She's my angel now. So that's an aside. So I have written several books, had a pretty good career, had some interesting publicity, was on PBS History Detectives and Good Morning, or CBS Good Morning, and all kinds of wonderful publicity of my books on historical architecture. And then I was married to an attorney, and I thought he was the love of my life. In fact, I was quite sure of it. We seemed to have a lot in common. I thought we had a good life together. And then April 2016, he came home for lunch one day and ended his life with a gun at our home, left behind a short note, a text actually, blaming me. The police found that note, and word spread far and wide that not only was this attorney dead, but that I was the cause. And for a sensitive soul, I cannot begin to express the devastation that occurred to me, that inflicted on me mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Being a believer, I had prayed for this man without ceasing every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And it wrecked not only my mental health, but my spiritual well-being. I did not understand why God did not intervene and stop this horrible thing from happening. So thus began a downward spiral. We lived in a beautiful home. I thought it was my dream home. I think it was my dream home. But after the funeral, I never spent the night in that house again. The memories were too horrible. And I had been raised as somebody who believes in spiritual healing, and yet I started using alcohol. I started abusing alcohol. I started abusing prescription drugs, benzodiazepines to be precise. And I didn't care if I died. I took enough that would actually knock me unconscious and follow it with some whiskey. So I'd start the day at 8 a.m. by downing some benzos and drinking some booze until I could pass out. So I was pretty messed up. And different people tried to take me into their home, but I was having horrific nightmares. And I would wake the household up with my screams at night. And I thought it was bad enough that he'd done this horrible thing, but I relived it every night in my sleep. The nightmares were unbelievable. In my dreams, I would run to get to him just as he pulled the trigger. So I just kept going down further and further. I actually lived out of my car briefly because I kind of had a psychotic break. I kind of lost my connection to everything. And a dear friend on the periphery of my life found out that I was in pretty bad shape, and she invited me to come live in her home. And I said, "Oh, no, 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 you do not want Rosemary in your home. The person I knew before this is dead and gone, dead and gone. You don't want me in her home." She insisted. She said, "Let's try it for one night," which was brilliant. So I tried it for one night, and she said, "Okay, it seemed like it worked pretty well. Let's do that another night." And I said, "Okay." And on it went. And after 4 months, I was able to move into a rental home with a friend. And again, I still needed a caretaker. I was pretty messed up. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I have shared this story with others and I say, yeah, my husband committed suicide and then I lost my mind and then I had this beautiful NDE and people don't understand this was not like a beloved husband who passes on in a hospital bed holding my hand whispering, I love yous. Suicide really is a death like no other. And I don't know that a lot of folks can really appreciate how utterly devastating it is. To give you an idea, I considered myself something of a smart cookie before this happened. And yet after it happened, I felt more like a stroke victim. I had trouble organizing thoughts, I had trouble speaking, and I literally lost the ability to read. I could read the words, but they didn't make any sense to me. It's like somebody took a bucket full of words and threw them against a wall. And I saw words like shoe and red and book, but I didn't know what they meant. In fact, one of the, at this time, I mean, this went on about a year and a half. I was trying to make a cake from a box mix. And I think it required some eggs and some oil and some water. And I could not understand what the recipe was telling me to do. And I ended up handing off the box to my roommate, the person who was taking good care of me. And I said, I can't do this. I don't know what it's telling me. I don't understand it. And this is from somebody who wrote 9 books. I used to be a reporter. I used to write voluminously, and now I couldn't read the instructions on a cake box. So this went on for 2 years, and during this time, I also fought suicidal urges beyond what can easily be described. And really, the only thing that kept me here was I would say, wait until tomorrow. Wait 24 hours before you end your life. And I would think maybe in 24 hours it will be better. And I was living in these really day-tight compartments, just trying to get through to the next day. And every now and then, I had a plan. I knew how I would do it. I knew where I would do it. I knew exactly every detail. And oftentimes I would close my eyes and think about the pleasure it would give me to end my life. And it was quite an indulgence. And yet it brought me peace, knowing that this wasn't going on forever. I know one point, and I told nobody about this. I knew if I told anybody about these thoughts, somebody would try to stop me, and I didn't want that. At one point, I met with a financial advisor. Somebody sat me down with her, and she said, Rosemary, where do you see yourself in 2 years? And I said, without missing a beat, oh, I'll be dead. I had no expectation to live very long. I knew either emotionally, I knew I would either do this to myself or my body would shut down. So thus passed 2.5 years, and I prayed 3 prayers every single night. I prayed, God, either heal me or let me go. I was in so much misery. The second prayer I prayed was, spare me the life review. I had spent a lifetime reading about NDEs, and I knew the formula. I know what most people experience. I mean, gosh, from Betty Eady to Daniel Brinkley, all of them. I read them. I had read them for all of my life. So I asked God, spare me the life review. In my dreams, I still saw my husband doing this countless times, again and again and again at night. I hated to go to sleep because I saw his death again and again. And then my third prayer was, I was tired of decisions. There were a lot of legal messes, financial messes that had to be fixed after his death. And each decision was so heavy and so burdensome. So I literally pleaded with God, let me go. No life review and no more big decisions. So at about 29 months after his death, and I would have been, I think, 59 years old at this time, I was living by myself now. I'd been living with myself briefly. I told my roommate, who had been helping me financially, emotionally, and physically in every other way, that it was time for him to find a home of his own and that I would be okay. And that had only been going on about 6 months. So about 29 months out, I had some physical problems that were disconcerting, and I went to a gynecologist, and she diagnosed cervical cancer. And I thought, no, not me, try again. And she said, no, we're sure. So I was referred to a gynecological oncologist, and they also took a look, and they said, not only do you have cervical cancer, but it is spread to a point that the flesh is visibly distorted. There is no doubt. And I felt like I'd been dropped into another nightmare. I mean, I already had planned to end my life, and now this just seemed like God hated me, with everything in the universe was working against me. And I thought I was pretty clear in those daily prayers, God, heal me or let me go. I kind of meant in my sleep. I didn't mean for this to happen. So I was told that I would have a hospitalization. They were going to do a surgery. They were going to do a cervical biopsy under general anesthetic to determine how far this had spread, exactly how far this had spread. And I was horrified. I had never had a surgery. I'd been a very healthy woman and had had 3 babies, and those were the only times I'd been hospitalized. So this all seemed horrible. I really felt like this had to be one of those nightmares. I was going to wake up. So the surgery went, and they said it was a very brief surgery. It took them 3 hours to rouse me from the general anesthetic. Then they put me in a little room, and as soon as I woke up, they said, up you go, off to the bathroom. And I stood up and went off to the bathroom, and I realized I was bleeding profusely. And I went back to the RN in attendance, and I said, I just lost an awful lot of blood, and I'm still losing blood. And she said, once you get home and rest and lay down, you'll feel fine. And fortunately, again, my buddy Milton, witnessed this. And I told her 3 times total, 2 more times, something's gone wrong. I am bleeding profusely. And each time I was dismissed. And so I went home. And at home, I realized it was only getting worse. And my beautiful house had white carpet, and I was very concerned about messing up that carpet. So with all this blood pouring out of my body, I went and stood in my walk-in shower. And I was leaning against the wall of that shower, and I didn't have to worry anymore about my carpet. And I thought to myself, you know what? For 29 months, for 2.5 years, you prayed every night that God would heal you or let you go. And, the Bible says that God will show you a way out. I thought, maybe this is God's mercy. Maybe this is my way out. Maybe this is God answering that prayer and giving me a doorway out of this horrible experience, this whole thing. And now I was facing chemo and radiation. I thought, yeah, this is my way out. So I was leaning against my shower wall, and I thought, yep, this might be my path out of here. And I was thinking those thoughts, and my buddy Milton and his sister Mabel were actually in the living room. They had brought me home from the hospital that day. And I thought, Milton is the one that found my husband's body after he did this violent suicide. Is it really fair to these two who have showered me with love and support for them to walk into this shower in a few minutes and find me dead on the floor, bled to death? And it really bugged me. And I thought, I want out. I'm done. But I thought, I can't do that to them. So I stepped out of the shower, and I was taken to a hospital, and it was actually a little hospital, an ER actually. It was a standalone ER, not connected, not physically connected to a hospital. And there they made a few more boo-boos, and it was like they didn't really take me seriously, which was unfortunate, as it turns out. And an RN was by my side there, and she was about my age. And I grabbed her hand because now I was like, you know what? I've decided to live. Let's get this show on the road. I grabbed her hand and I said, promise me you're not going to let me die. And she leaned over and she looked very close in my eyes and just had the face of mother love. There could not be anyone who, I felt like she was in the perfect profession. Never had a nurse looked at me with such tenderness and solicitude. And she said, oh, honey, we're not going to let you die. We have many solutions for this. So they did some things that turned out weren't great things to do. And they gave me some dilaudid, and they stepped out. One of the things they did is they packed me with gauze, which what turns out that did not stop the bleeding. It just stopped the mess. So I was still bleeding. And they left me hooked up to a blood pressure monitor and a pulse ox on my fingertip. Unfortunately, again, my buddy Milton was there, sitting there by my bedside, because I'm not sure what they were thinking was going to happen next. I guess they were getting me ready for transport to a hospital. Well, my buddy Milton, it's great to have a witness to your life. My buddy Milton says that at one point my blood pressure went to 32/25, which is pretty darn low. And then the next thing that happened was he said, I had been unconscious at this point, and he said, your eyes popped open, and he said, you reached your arms up above you, like you were almost like a little child reaching up for a parent to take you. And he said, you said something to whomever you saw above you. And Milton said he stood up and he looked over me and he said, you looked right through me. And after this, my arms flopped back to my side and the blood pressure monitor went to error, which meant it was probably lower than 32/25. And then the alarms went off, and that's when actually a nurse ran in, and she did what they call I think it's called a sternum rub. where she raked her fingers over my chest, which was supposed to elicit a pain response, I've since learned, and nothing happened. And she checked the blood pressure machine, she fiddled with the plug in the outlet. And the bottom line is I was gone. And meanwhile, I am having the time of my life. I awakened from like a deep dreamless state, being catapulted out of my body. And I mean catapulted. And it was as though there was a silvery, sinewy something, a cord from the crown of my head to my heel. And like an archer's bow, like somebody had pulled back and released it. And man, I went flying out of that body so dramatically. And it was like, whoa, it wasn't startling, but it sure was interesting and fun, 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 fun. And I was just moving through this blackness. Several people have asked me, did you see your body? I did not. And I think that was God's mercy. I mean, I had just bled to death and I probably didn't look too good, but I was floating away in this blackness and it was great. And one of my first thoughts was, my heart has stopped. And I said it out loud. I lived alone for a while. I got used to talking to myself, and I have my wonderful little dog and talk to her all the time. And so it was normal for me in this new experience to talk to myself out loud. So I said, my heart has stopped. And I thought, how do I know that? I thought, I don't know how I know that, but I know that's right. And then I thought, won't all those nurses and medical folks be surprised at how this turned out? No one saw this coming. And as I'm floating further and further away from my body, there were so many thoughts. But one of them was, I can hear myself talk. I thought, that's pretty interesting. And I sound just like I always sound. And I thought, I don't think I have vocal cords. I know I don't have breath sounds. I don't know about ears, but I sure hear myself. And then in the midst of this experience, I mean, this felt like it went on and on. Afterwards, if you told me I'd been dead for 2 months, I would have believed it. Time, I know this is hard for us to understand, but time had no meaning. Time had no relevance. But one of my thoughts was when I said, I'm dying. And my next thought was, being the longtime writer, I said, actually, you're not dying, you're dead. And that cracked me up, because when you go into your reward, the most important thing is correcting your tense. And that made me laugh out loud. And I heard myself giggle, my very unique rosemary-shaped giggle. And I heard it. And again, I thought, everything I really am has gone with me. I left nothing behind. And I realized I was experiencing perfect peace and perfect joy and perfect calm. I know a lot of folks who pass on and come back talk about the love. And I had had the great blessing of having a mom who loved me unconditionally, so I knew about love. But I had always suffered from profound anxieties from every direction. And ever since my husband's suicide and the mess and the notes and being ostracized from society and losing everything I owned on this earth, I had tremendous anxiety and PTSD and, fear of everything. You name it, I had it. And I realized I was calm. I had perfect peace. And I even thought about the Bible verse, the perfect peace that passeth all understanding. And I thought, this is what Paul was talking about. This is perfect peace. And there's no way you can describe it. It's absolutely perfect. And I even thought to myself, my whole life, 59 years, I've wondered what I would look like with perfect peace, with no fears, no anxieties, no, oh no, what's going to happen next, with none of that. And I thought, this is what I look like. And I thought, this is great. And this experience just felt like it was getting better and better with every passing second. I'm still floating. And the thing is, I've always been a type A. I can't even ride in the passenger seat of a car without saying, where are we going? You're driving too fast. You're too close to that car in front of you. You can get over in the left lane. And now I'm just floating along for the ride. And it was fantastic. But I was joined by a massive spiritual presence. And I felt this presence so profoundly, more so than somebody walking into the room that you can hear, see, smell, all of it. So I turned my head slightly to my left and looked up, because this presence was to my left. And I thought, you know what? I just turned my head to the left and looked over my left shoulder. So I have a human form of some kind. But this presence, we're in perfect blackness. And by the way, this blackness was actively comforting as a verb. It wasn't just comfortable, but it was actively comforting me. I heard somebody else describe it as velvet. And that's what it felt like. But I asked this presence, because now I'm having a good time and have somebody with me. I said, and who are you? And the answer was, you are the image and likeness I'm the original. And I thought, that's Genesis 1:27. I've spent my whole life studying that verse, studying the whole Bible, but in particular that verse. What does it mean to be the image and likeness? Now I got it, because it wasn't just words. It came with an infusion of knowledge, and I got it. I remember thinking, you know what, that would have been nice to know back on earth, but hey, it's all good. I'm glad to know it. Love that Bible verse, one of my favorites, and now I get it. And I really and truly felt like I was 1/100000th of a drop of water in the ocean being reunited with the source, with God, with all of it, with infinity. It was just so wonderful. And, several people have said, oh, you probably wanted to come back. Oh, no, I did not. And I'm still somewhat miffed about this whole thing of getting sent back. But this went on and on and on. And so much happened. Again, just so much happened. Check my time here, 3:42. So much happened throughout this event. Uh, I have spent 2 hours at a time. I wrote a book. The book is 160 pages, talking about all that unfolded in this experience. But at some point in this experience, I was no longer floating in this blackness, but I was in a white room. And what's so interesting to me, beyond the obvious, I don't remember the transition. It's like somebody took my batteries out. 1 minute I'm floating in this darkness, hearing, "You're the," I'll say, "You're the image and likeness. I'm the original." And I'm thinking about the perfect peace. And I'm thinking about, the other thing I thought about is I had such clear memories of everything that I left on Earth. I mean, on one hand, I was not worried about my 3 daughters, which I find so curious. I wasn't saying, "Oh no, this is going to be hard on the kids. They weren't expecting this." I thought of them. I thought, yeah, they'll be fine. I mean, that's what I thought. But I mean, I had an awareness of them, but it wasn't even a worry about them. But the other thing that happened was I was scheduled to start daily radiation for 6 weeks and once a week chemotherapy. And I remember thinking, not don't need to worry about that now, do I? And I remember being so grateful, so grateful. This mess of a life was over. And I truly felt like I had been granted early release for good behavior. No kidding. That was the predominant emotion, was gratitude, and I am out. I am out of this thing. Oh my goodness, I can't begin to describe. There are people in this world that are in love with life. And I had never felt that connected to this life and this world. But boy, after my husband's suicide, I just wanted out. I just wanted out, out, out. So, one of the thoughts after I came back from this experience being a writer, I sat down. I was in the hospital for several days after this, but I sat down with my laptop and I wrote the whole thing out, about 40 pages. And I thought, okay, when you're in that blackness and you're floating along, what were you saying? And I thought, I remember. I said, I like floating. Floating is fun. This is great. And I thought, oh my gosh, for a writer, that's awful. You should have used bigger words, much bigger words. That sounds like a 4-year-old dancing around in a field of wildflowers. But that's what I said. So I did not want to come back. But at some point, as I said, I don't remember the transition, but I was no longer floating, but I was standing on, I guess, my own legs in a white room. And at the end of this white room, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 feet in front of me, there was a door. And I knew what that door meant. Having read all these NDEs, and oh my goodness, I read the books, I read website accounts, I listened to people's stories on YouTube. I really was into this NDE thing. But I knew what that door meant. I knew once I got to that door and opened the door and passed through, I was done. There was no going back. So I'm in this white room and I'm walking. I remember thinking, I don't know if I have legs. I don't know how this works, but I know that if I move with intention, I can get to that door. And the best word I can use to describe it is I perambulated toward the door. I don't know if I walked or I glided or how this unfolded. But in this white room, there was a white mist falling all around me. It was almost like a London fog, like a pea soup fog. And yet it wasn't cold. Again, the comfort was indescribable. And I looked around the room and there were no light fixtures. This brilliant white light room was illuminated from within. It was luminescent, pearlescent, bright, bright, bright white. And these little itty bitty droplets of light, of mist, were all around me. And I remember at one point trying to focus on an individual droplet. And I thought, this seems kind of crazy, trying to focus on a vapor droplet. And I realized I couldn't. And then I was now with, I guess, a spiritual being or an angel. And the angel said, you cannot focus on an individual droplet because your eyes have not acclimated to this new experience yet. And the angel said, but what you're seeing is light. This these are particles of light swirling and dancing around you. And I was told that before we go to heaven, the sadness, the belief of a disease process, whatever is imprinted on our soul has to be washed away. And that's what this white room is for. We're cleansed. We're spiritually, emotionally, mentally cleansed before we can go into heaven, before we advance to heaven. And it's like a friend of mine said, leave your muddy boots at the door. And I absolutely love that. So it was awesome witnessing this light swirling around me and being comforted by it and knowing what was happening. Like, this isn't going to take long. And I got to that door, couldn't wait to get through that door. Oh my goodness. And another funny thought I thought my whole life, I've wondered what would take me out. Being a writer, being that person whose superpower is overthinking everything, I thought I've always wondered what would take me out. This is pretty interesting. I'd been a lifelong Christian Scientist, and the first medical procedure sends me to my reward. I found that pretty entertaining. And I thought my whole life I kind of wondered how it would end. And this is kind of anticlimactic, went to the hospital and get killed. So it was quite a thing. But I got to the door, and I paused at that door, and I asked my spiritual companion, I said, is this the divine will for my life? Because when you're in that place, all you want to do is the will of the Most High God. All you want to do is live inside of God's will. And as desperately as I wanted to go through that door, I more so wanted to do what God wanted me to do, what the original wanted of me. And the angel said, no, it's not. But whatever you decide, you go with all of God's love and mercy and care and grace and blessings. And I thought, wow, okay, I'll take that deal. And I put up my right hand to push through this door. And I thought that's pretty interesting. Right-handed on earth, right-handed in heaven. I thought that was pretty cool. Everything everything down to the details had gone with me. And as I did this, I had a vision of that nurse who had been so kind and loving to me. And I saw that nurse in a hospital supply room on a little metal stool, leaning forward, head in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. And through gasp and tears, she said, I promised that woman I wasn't going to let her die, and I lost her. And I thought, oh, come on, don't do this to me. Please don't do this to me. And then I thought, you know what? She's an RN, about my age. She's been down this road a time or two. She'll get over it. Just take her a few days. She'll be fine. And then I didn't just see that nurse. I experienced her grief and her sadness and her regret. And the best I can say, it kind of hit me squarely in the chest. Which I don't know if I had a chest, but something like it. And I knew that pain. I knew that deep agonal grief. And I knew that I could not do this to another human being. If I had it in me to spare somebody that much pain, I had to go back. And, several people have asked me, was this a concurrent event? No, everybody was in that room working on my body, trying to get me back. I believe it was a potential future event. So I put my right hand down to my side, pretty disheartened, frankly. And I remember thinking, the last thing I said in heaven was, this is going to ruin that nurse's day if I die. And boy, in a millisecond of a millisecond, I was back on that gurney in that little tiny ER. Lots of things happening all over me. I actually felt the presence of an angel in the upper left corner of that room, just kind of looking at me going, hi, you're back. And it wasn't even a gotcha. It was like, yeah, you're back. It's going to be okay. As soon as, I'm not even sure if it was when I was in heaven. I think it was pretty much when I was in heaven, or immediately upon my return, I was told that everything would be restored, that I would be healed. And the emotional grief was healed. And frankly, my soul was restored. And ultimately it was discovered that all of the cancer was gone. And in fact, the oncologist, I had to find a new oncologist. It turns out when you say you're healed in heaven, they're like, yeah, right. But I had to find a new oncologist. And the new oncologist said, after the second surgery, she said, your flesh is so pink and pretty and perfect, I'm not sure you ever had cancer. So it was a dramatic restoration. And then I sold everything I owned, moved 1,000 miles due west, started a new life, and here I am in the Midwest. Oh, and I've got a website, if I could mention it, temporarydeath.com.